Hey guys, it's Core Ross and welcome to Busted Rainbow Six Siege. Today we are myth-busting Grimm, who is coming with the new season Operation Brutal Swarm. And I've already got another Mythbusters out right now which goes over some of the big balancing changes that are coming to the game with the new season, like the big nerf to frag grenades. But anyway, let's jump into Grimm. And the first thing you should know is just how this gadget works. If you are in the swarm as a defender, you will be pinged continuously, so it's better than Jackal and better than Lion. So whatever you do as a defender, do not stand in the actual swarm itself, because that'll be a perfect ping constantly for the attackers. And once you move away from the swarm, then the ping becomes like Alibi or Jackal, going off every so often, so it's not quite as accurate, especially if you are moving. So keep that in mind when this new operator hits in a new season. Grimm versus Vigil. So in the reveal, they made a big thing about Mute being a great counter for Grimm, but Vigil works pretty good against them too. However, there is something that I find interesting. So here we go, we got the swarm up, we got our gadget on, and you'll notice that we have the red indicator letting us know, and we're getting points for deceiving the swarm. However, we actually do get pinged right away. So the initial ping does work on Vigil, but then the follow-up ones don't if his ability is on, making him probably the best counter against Grimm, because the mute jammers are great, but you have to pre-place them. So Vigil, I would say, is the best counter against Grimm, even with the downside of that initial ping going off, and it means that Vigil can't be entirely stealthy when going up against the swarm, but at least he can stop follow-up pings, and that is confirmed. Now, I kind of thought of this guy as being a little bit like Capital and Lion mashed together, and I wondered if his gadget actually had drop, like how Capital's firebolts have a arc that they actually drop down over distance. But we went outside and we got a nice big distance here, so what I'm going to do is aim at Maestro, who is left with 5 health, and we're going to directly hit him with one of these projectiles. First of all, travel time is extraordinarily slow, and we don't get a cool kill cam, unfortunately. But yeah, there is no drop from this thing, so wherever you point it, it is going to hit. And that's busted, there is no drop from this weapon. Grimm versus Mute. So this is actually very similar to the interaction with Dockaby. If you get a call, you can just run into a mute jammer and the call ends, which is awesome. But there is a little bit more to it with this gadget. So first of all, if one of these lands in a mute jammer radius, it just will not go off. And if the canister, which always falls down, ends up in a mute jammer, it will not go off as well until the mute jammer has been destroyed. Then they will deploy as normal. And be noted that Grimm's gadget is melee proof and bulletproof. It can only be destroyed by explosives, so being next to a mute jammer, you're probably not going to use an explosive to take it out. Now, if you do see one of Grimm's gadgets come flying into the room, you can move to a mute jammer and then you'll be completely protected from it. Even if the swarm is actually flying around near you, it just will not see you and it will not ping you. Also, if you get pinged by the actual swarm when you're outside the mute jammer, then you can just simply move into a mute jammer radius and the pings will stop. So that's another way to get out of the problem of Grimm. And I think this means if Grimm gets picked a lot in the new season, I could imagine that Mute's pick rate will also go up by about the same amount. But anyway, that's confirmed. Mute jammers are a great way to avoid this gadget. So always be aware of where the nearest jammer is. Now, if you don't happen to have a mute jammer or you're playing Vigil, then you're going to have to use impact grenades. It's kind of your only other way around it, and you need to be fast. So you're going to have to take out the ball part of this gadget when it attaches to surfaces. If you wait too long and the actual canister comes out and it falls to the ground, then you actually can't take that out quick enough in order to actually stop the swarm, because they pop out as soon as it hits the ground. So although you can stop it with impact grenades, you need to be super quick, but certainly it is confirmed. And that moves us on to the sneakiest of girls on defense, which is Cav, and her ability to sneak around undetected. And of course, it actually works against Jackal, which is some sort of electronic device. But with Grimm, She's not beating these little bees at all. They will track her no matter what, even if her ability is fully on. So that is busted for Cav. Now what about electricity? So first of all, let's just drop some of the gadgets into electrified surfaces to see what happens. So first of all, reinforced wall, and it fries the ball, so that gets taken out immediately. We'll also fire one directly into the barbed wire, and we'll drop a canister into it as well, and it gets fried. So this isn't a great counter at all, but what it means is, as a Grimm player, you do want to watch out for electric barbed wire on the floor or reinforced walls, and just don't obviously shoot anywhere near them. And I also did attempt to actually lay down in the barbed wire while the bees were flying around to see if the swarm would get zapped in midair, which could have been a quite good way to actually counter them. But no, it's busted. Now, right from the very first teaser we got for this season, which was this Cold Night Haven CGI, there was one problem, and it was this big ball on the table that obviously was too big for the actual launcher, so I assumed it was something different, and it ended up actually coming out of this launcher. And I think you can see the problem here, and that is there is no way this ball fits in the launcher. Like, no chance whatsoever. However, this doesn't end with this. You'll notice that from Grimm's first person perspective, with a shoulder mounted weapon, he looks down the iron sights, just like a normal gun in the game. But the only problem is, how is he doing that? If we actually look at him from the third person perspective, we can see that his head is actually next to the launcher and not above it. And also his third person animation for aiming down the sights is simply to kind of firm up more and kind of tense up. He doesn't actually move his head to look down the sights, so there's a big disconnect. Now, I'm not really too fussed by this, but I do think it's funny that he's looking down the iron sights of a shoulder-mounted weapon, and they could have easily put an iron sight on the actual left-hand side of the weapon, and that might have actually been quite smart because it would block a large amount of his view when he's aiming. Maybe that would be a downside of using it, but yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, so that is busted. Grimm's balls are just too big for his tube. So let's move on to Alibi versus Grimm. Now, my thinking here was that these drones must have some sort of camera on board because they actually do ID the operators, and obviously they ping and track them for the attackers. So they must have electronics on board that are visually identifying someone's location and reporting it back. So if they see a hologram, I think it'd be a great interaction if it pinged a hologram thinking it was a player, and that would be a brilliant counter. So if they ever need to weaken Grimm just a little bit, I think Alibi being a counter would be a sweet option. However, right now that is busted. Grimm versus Jaeger. So Jaeger's ADS will intercept this gadget and take it out, but with Grimm having 5 shots from this thing, he can also just burn right through all the ADSs if he wants to, leaving it open for like frag grenades or whatever to follow up. So although I would say Jaeger is a counter, I don't know, it might actually be that Grimm is a counter for Jaeger, having so many of those gadgets that he can launch in very, very quickly. Like, he can just launch them right after each other, no reloading. It's also the same for Wamai as well, and I don't agree with this. I think Wamai's magnets should actually ignore them, because that should be a negative for Jaeger, but a positive for Wamai, and a good little differentiator between the two operators. And with the current setup, it's worse for Wamai, because Jaeger's will at least destroy the gadget, while Wamai's will still deploy the bees, which I would say is worse overall. But that is confirmed, Wamai will grab Grimm's balls. And that moves us on to the conclusion of this video. So first of all, a disclaimer, which is that this has all been tested on the test server, so things can change, but right now, Grimm is a lot of fun to play. I do think he's more fun than Ash. I don't think he's overpowered, but he is the first operator in a very long time to be potentially on the edge of that. And it's going to come down to player composition, how a team plays, the tactics they can come up with. But I do think that Grimm is a lot of fun, and his only real major negative is the fact that he kind of has to get line of sight on where he wants to put the bees, which is kind of like Capital and might get him shot just trying to deploy his gadget. But then the other side of it is that Grimm has an absolutely beautiful loadout and he's got a lot of shots off that gadget, so if he can utilize them, he can become super powerful. So we'll see what will happen when he hits live servers, hopefully on the launch date of September 6th. If there's no delays, we'll see. But anyway guys, go check out my other Mythbusters for this season where we look at the nerfed nade, the improved hard breach, and the brand new EMP impact. Anyway guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.